Hey, it's Detroit Bob, and I'm here in what we call the region. Specifically, it's called the Calumet region, and we're known for sand and steel. So this is one of the Great Lakes. It's Lake Michigan, and this is where the big freighters full of iron ore came in to one of the biggest factories and producers of steel, U.S. Steel, right in Gary, Indiana. The sand that you see here, they used it in Detroit at the Rouge plant to make glass for automobiles, windshields, rear view mirrors, everything made out of glass. My dad worked in that plant for Henry Ford. So you know what else came out in this area? A little band called the Jackson 5. About 20 minutes down the road, the Jackson family, Joe Jackson, the dad, worked at U.S. Steel just down the road. So the 9 Jacksons lived at 2300 Jackson Avenue. How ironic is that? One of the greatest entertainers ever, right over this way, downtown Gary. Tune in, we're gonna do some more on the Lake Belt, Ypsilanti, Detroit, and Chicago. It's gonna be a great episode. All right, I'm coming up over this little hill here, and you can just see Lake Michigan right out in front of us. And this Lake Belt area, as my friend Mark likes to call it, stretches basically from Toronto, heck, all the way to the Mississippi River by way of water. So you have the St. Lawrence Seaway, which actually goes eastward towards Quebec by Toronto, and then you enter Lake Ontario, and then you got Lake Erie, then you go up Lake Huron over the top of Michigan. You can go right and go up to Lake Superior, or you can go left and come down the belly of this great body of water called Lake Michigan. And iron ore ships used to bring in the ore, and then you can see the steel mill down the beach. That's U.S. Steel right there. And they used to bring it in there by the shipload and make it into steel. And this steel basically built the Mackinac Bridge, it built half of Chicago, and was shipped out via rail all over the United States. So if it was made out of steel, good chance it came from either here or Pennsylvania. That whole town of Gary was built in 1906 for the steel mill. But what's great is this just became a national park around here. So we're getting all sorts of tourism based on nature. But you can't ignore the industrial past of the Lake Belt, because this is the factories that built America and the workers that came up here from the South all over the United States to get jobs, decent, good paying jobs, hard-working Americans that worked their butt off for generations so that the next generation could do a little bit better. And they always say, you know what, the rock and roll had to be loud enough to get over the sound of the stamping plants. So Detroit, Cleveland, Chicago, Joliet, Ypsilanti, St. Joe, Benton Harbor, all these towns had factories, and they were stamping out parts and stamping out products, but it was all based around this lake belt and the Great Lakes region. Reporting from the region, the biggest rock and roll fan of all time, Detroit Bob. All right, that's a nice rocky beach. What I like to do is look for beach glass. So, signs of man, where pollution from 100 years ago becomes little gems. What's this? There's a piece right there. So you get a piece of beach glass like that. It's an old sort of frosty, dirty piece of glass that's been polished into a stone. Check that out, it's pretty cool. All right, talk about rock and roll. These rocks are what we call glacial till. And Lake Michigan is basically the remnants of a melted glacier that receded. And when the ice melted, it just dumped all these little gravel rocks. Some of them are from thousands of miles away. They've all been tumbled and polished to varying degrees. And when farmers cleared this land, they found boulder size and sometimes house sized rocks. And it's called glacial till, and that's about as rock and roll as I can get. At this point, you're probably thinking, has Detroit Bob lost his mind? No. Well, let me show you where we were at. The other day when we did our little spiel, we were right here, right at the base of Lake Michigan. And this is that area I was talking about. They call it the Lake Belt. They used to call it the Rust Belt, but it's a inland waterway. It goes through all the states of New York, Pennsylvania, goes through Ontario, down through Lake Ontario, Lake Erie, and then back up over the top of Ohio. And Detroit in French means strait. So it's not a river, it's a strait because it connects two larger bodies of water. And then you go up into Lake Huron. So all these shipping lanes were created by these great massive lakes. Lake Superior up here, where all the iron ore came from, and then down back into Lake Michigan to where we were at. So it's no wonder that all these factories opened along these lines. Now from Chicago, you can go out the Illinois River all the way over to the Mississippi, and you can go down to all the way to New Orleans. So this inland waterway, a lot of people who don't know a lot about America think it's all New York and LA. If you go east, this St. Lawrence River goes all the way to Quebec. So here's all your great manufacturing towns. You have your Buffaloes, your Clevelands, you got your Erie, Pennsylvania. These towns are cranking out products made of that sand and steel that I was talking about. Detroit, of course, the automobile industry, okay? And then you get down into St. Joseph, Grand Rapids, just off via river, and of course, Chicago and Gary, the home of U.S. Steel, the largest steel plant in the world, and also home to the Jackson 5. So right there, Gary, Indiana, created basically just to make a steel plant. Now, one little thing I wanted to point out before we go away. There's a little tiny town right over here by Flint called Owasso. That little town had the ARP pressing plant, which produced most of Motown's records and pressed the first Beatles record ever released in America. So when I show you later that little ARP stamp, this little town was cranking out records, and it maybe cranked out the most 45s of any town in the United States. Why? Well, at this point, you didn't need big waterways because these records were made out of PVC, polyvinyl chloride, which were little pellets. These came in via truck or rail. So the machines that made the records, yeah, they were cranked out of steel. The jukeboxes were made out of steel and glass and electronics and so forth. But it was this great, incredible lake belt that fed these factories and fed them with raw materials. And also the workers that came up to work there were from all over, okay? So that's the amazing story of the lake belt. Yeah, steel and sand was the lifeblood of these factories. Here's a picture of the workers at Fisher Body. And why do I know that? Because my grandfather came to Detroit in the 1920s, and that's him right here at the end. He worked as a supervisor at the Fisher Body. He dropped out of high school, but he came to Detroit to get a job, and there he is right there. And these guys looks like some tough customers, but I'll tell you what, Fisher Body made all the chassis for General Motors and probably other car companies too. The next generation, there's my dad in his 1949 Ford that he paid cash for. Because when he was out of high school, he walked across the street at 17 years old and got hired, and he made as much as a family man. My dad said, "Why did you need to go to college?" He later got out of the factory and became a teacher. But there he is, his pride and joy with leopard skin seat covers. And talk about a chick magnet. That was it right there. And that basically, that car helped him win over my mom. And there they are years later, sort of the Buzz Aldrin space era, just enjoying living in America in the 50s and 60s. And there's my other grandpa drinking a Stroh's beer with my dad. He came up from Central City, Kentucky, the home of the Everly Brothers, and he was a teacher in Detroit. And there you go, circa 1950. What happened to the next generation? That's us. So cheers. Did I mention steel? Did I mention glass? Well, this is it, man. This is what all started my craze of 45 RPM records. This is a 1963 Row AMI that came out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. And look at all that chrome on that baby. Look at all that glass. And the cool part, it was one of the first ones to incorporate stereo. So not only could I get 145s in here, but with that, 200 selections. Now this is glass, and check this out. It's a JEL 200. And look at that low serial number. 6,926. So this could be the 26th one that they made. 1500 Union Avenue, Grand Rapids, Michigan. Row AC Manufacturing. What a sweet beauty. Let's take a look inside. This baby looks even better when the lights are dim. Now I've got a little frame here that I can put a 45 in, but if you look at, you would get 7 plays for a $50, 3 plays for a quarter, and either a dime or 2 nickels would get you 1 play. Now what's this 3345 auto mix? Well, like I told you last episode, you could play 7-inch records that were 33 1/3. Let's look inside. I'll show you how that works. All right, well, what we do is lift this up, and it weighs a ton. So let's go ahead and do this. A little skip there, it'll survive. Sort of a Bakelite plastic. Watch this thing take this record off the rack and put it back in what they call the carousel. Now 28 things have to go right for that record to get on the carousel and get played. And one of the things is either the large hole or the small spindle will come up inside of that record. But to initiate it, you have to press a letter, and then you got to press a number. That initiates the process. There we go. We just pressed D4. This is going to go all the way to D4. It's going to stop when it gets there, and then the mechanism is going to do the rest. Here we go. It happens quick. There's the record. Boom, on the turntable, needle on the record. How cool is that? When I bought it, it had this original sticker right there. So you know this came out of Chicago. These things were built to last about 7 years, and then they would be replaced. So that's how it works, man, the Row AMI. The rest is history, because I had to get records to go ahead and finish this baby out. And once I started collecting 45s and started building my own playlist for my Row AMI, I was hooked. And like they say, the rest is history. All right. Hunted down. My sense on a jukebox, you just better have some good rockabilly, some good bar music, some just lifelong classics that are what I call jukebox songs. Look at this very primitive, pre-psychedelia little mind warp thing. But these things were meant to be over in the far corner, and they're all lit up like this, and that would draw you over to it, see? So you would come over to the corner and plop your coins in, your hard-earned money, and a bartender on a good night might make a couple $100 just off the jukebox. How cool is that? The 1963 Row AMI JEL. That's where it all began. Sand, making the glass, and steel, maybe from right here in Gary, Indiana, in the mill that I showed you earlier. All right, Detroit Bob, my good friend Todd asked me to do something about condition. Well, this is a good time because I sold a record, Harper Valley PTA by Jeannie C. Riley. So I have 3 copies, and they bought the Good Plus copies. So let's go through these. This is, I think, the one I had rated Good Plus. I have 3 in my collection. I could go back and say that's a very good. Well, let's see what the definition is of Good Plus. You got to sort of zero in on a couple different elements. Good Plus. Can play without skipping, significant scratches, surface noise, and groove wear. And I don't play all my records. I just visually grade them. And I've made a note of that. I see some scuffs on the edges. I can almost guarantee you this is going to play without skipping. That's not the issue here. The issue is that a Good Plus are very good. On retrospect, maybe you can see with that little reflection there, I would probably give that a very good grading. So I would rather undergrade than overgrade. Now let's look at this one. So maybe this is my Good Plus. Yeah, this is probably my Good Plus. A little bit more scuffed up. And let's compare to very good. Very good, it says, according to the definition of very good, noticeable groove wear and light scratches. Surface noise will not overpower the music. So if you compare these next to each other, boy, this one's a little more scratched up. So I think that's my very good. And the writing on the label, that sort of knocks it down, in my opinion, but it's not officially part of the grading. So yeah, this has got a lot of scuffs right there by the palm of my hand there. You see those scuffs. So that's going to knock it down to a very good. And then I have a near mint. And everybody wants to call everything mint, but near mint just means near mint. The definition is a nearly perfect record. And the record should show no obvious signs of wear. So near mint could still have some micro scratches on it. But boy, that's pretty clean. Now what you see on the surface is just dust. But if I went over that with a dry cloth, and I use these microfiber cleaning cloths, you can just see how clean that is. Even the label is really clean and neat. So that's my near mint. Now when I sell, if I got 3 copies, I tend to list my lowest rated copy. A couple reasons for that. If I can't find the copy that I sold, I can always give them a better copy, and then you got a happy customer, and it's not going to break the bank. So that's near mint right there. This is a great song, by the way, Harper Valley PTA. I think it was, oh yeah, look at that, Tom T. Hall. What do they call him, America's Storyteller right there? Tom T. Hall, right there. He wrote a lot of great songs. Harper Valley PTA. It's sort of like a women's lib song, and I hate to say that, but I think it's just a great song, period. But at the time, this was sort of radical. For basically, the story is a single woman or an independent woman goes in and just tells everybody off at the local PTA. It's pretty damn good. So anyways, that's my, there's near mint. There's the Good Plus that I sold. And here's the one in between, which was the very good. So I still have the very good and the near mint in my collection. I'll get rid of the Good Plus, and then I'll bump up and sell this very good. Now you say, oh, he's stacking them. This is raised right here. So right now, these 2 records' surface is not touching each other. So yeah, you know, we're 45 collectors. We don't get all hung up on overly grading or overgrading. We're not worshiping these little pieces of American history. We're rating them like we would a coin. You know, how often would you see a coin, an old Roman coin in very good plus condition? Not very often. So how about an old 100-year-old? So these are plastic. These aren't even metal. Styrene, vinyl, whatever you want to call them. So a little bit on condition there. Todd asked me to do something, and I included it in this video. All right, Detroit Bob, this is what I do every morning. I get up, I get my coffee, and throw on some vinyl, and start entering my finds into my Discogs. Now that's a roulette label. I just entered this Marvin Gaye. As you can see, I had a few of them. Very good, and this last one was only good condition. But you know what? I'll take it. You'll see here some stats in Discogs. 469 have this 125 watt. So that sets up that ratio of supply and demand. And we all learned about it in economics class. It was last sold in 2024, and I could click and see how much that sale price was for. Median price is $927. So I have one for sale. That little blue #1 tells me that. So I'm already on to my next record. This is Roulette. It's a common. It's part of that Ipsy stash. Some cool stuff on here. Tommy James, and you may know Tommy James and the Shondells. And then he did some stuff basically as Tommy James solo. A lot of hits. Crimson and Clover, great 60s song. If you remember Joan Jett, she covered that, I believe, on the I Love Rock and Roll album, but she did a great version of it. You can see this thick black band, and you can see what kind of condition it's in. It's probably a good plus at best, but I'm looking in this band to see for any particular markings that indicate where it was pressed. And I'm going to show you here in a minute. So a lot of times I'll give these just a dry surface cleaning, and I use this microfiber cloth. There's actually two sides to it. So one side has a little bigger nub, but for a dry cleaning I'm going to use the bigger nub, or the more coarse of the fibers. And I basically create a pad with my hand of 4 fingers underneath the record, and then my thumb on the top. And so my real cleaning surface is these 4 pads here. And so I want to place those under the cloth, and then sort of wrap the cloth around my hand like that. So now I rotate. I used to do it 10 times, but now I do 6. And then I rotate in the other direction. But I replace the pads of my 4 fingers underneath, so I actually get different contact points. Then of course I flip, just a dry cleaning. So I got the 4 pads underneath the record, thumb comes over the top, rotate 6 times one way, and then reposition, and then 6 times the other way. That's what I call a quick dry cleaning. And now I'm looking for condition, of course. So the first thing I see is the surface stuff right here. You see that little scratch right there? Now, you might say, is it a scratch or a scuff? It's better if it's a scuff, because you'd be surprised, these things play through scuffs real well. Now, that dead wax stuff that I'm looking for, I can actually see it better now. And you have to get the lighting just right to see this stuff, or it just disappears into the plastic. So if I can see if I can get it to pop. Right there. See that? Now, your question is, what the hell does that say? Let's see if I can zoom in even more. Okay, so if you're looking at it and I'm looking at it, we should be able to see it, right? And there's some numbers scratched in there, and I'll read them off for you in a minute. But I'm looking for a pressing plant. Okay, So we'll get back to that. I might not need it. Now the reason I might not need it is because these numbers make sense right here. R-7028. And also on the other side, this is on the label, number 19468. So if those two numbers, I should get pretty close to where I need to be. I got the name of the band, the name of the song. It's a US, it says right there, made in the US, so it's a US release, and the name of the label, Roulette. So let's see what we get with all that information, and I might not need the dead wax info. All right, well, you probably get a little bit of what they call a Moore effect when I film directly on my computer screen. But you can see, just typing in those two numbers, along with Roulette, and I still have a lot of choices. So we might have to get into that dead wax. These numbers here, these threes, 1, 1, 1, those are the three locations that are the three copies that I own of this record. I'm going to click on this and see what we get. So there's a lot of variations, right? So I'm going to have to get into that dead wax, and I'm going to have to look at this label very carefully and compare it with all those different variations. One of these on this screen is going to be the master copy, but I want to make sure we have my exact copy, and it could be a variant of one of those more popular ones that could be more valuable. So we want to take the time and do it right. All right, I'm able to narrow it down just by clicking this little USA button over here on the left and getting rid of all the foreign copies. So there you go. I got one. That's the master. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, if your eyes are good, you can eliminate some of these just by looking at the font. And the font is wrong. So let's try narrowing it down. All right, normally I wouldn't clean this record, but I'm going to do it so I can just show you the dead wax a little bit better. I use this stuff here. I think someone told me that the Smithsonian used it. I don't know if it's true or not, but it works pretty good. And I give it usually 3 sprays from a little bit of a ways away. You want like droplets. You don't want, and I'll hit the back side, right? Or the front side. And then I'll come back in with my cloth, remember? And I'll show you my like grip 4 fingers underneath. And let's back this up a little bit so you can see what I'm talking about. So I come in with my 4 fingers underneath the cloth and then sort of create my thumb as the pincher on top. And it's okay to let the fluid sit on there for a few seconds. Now, I'm probably going to do more like a 10 rotations. You got to make sure you're all the way around the record. And then so you can swipe off and then re-grip for the reverse. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So in reality, I just cleaned the bottom of it though. So I'm going to flip it over, re-grip, move your hands on the cloth so you're not just smashing down the same fabric that's already wet, if that makes sense. Come back. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now remember, you have a dry side of the cloth, which you haven't used that, and that's more of the smaller little nubs, I call them. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The 4-finger technique. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we'll reposition every time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so you can see it cleaned the record up quite a bit. I mean, we still got something on it right there. That could be a piece of wax. You get a lot of wax, like candle wax. Sometimes you can just take it off with your, you don't want to get in there and scratch it, but we could work on that. We could probably get it off. I'm trying to look in this dead wax area. This is the number that I really, really want to get, which is right hiding in there. Can you see that? There's an A2 in there. And that usually indicates these stamped letters, either A, A3, or I, like black letters. That's usually indicates the pressing plant. Can you see that? It's a little in it's an A2. A lot of these stamping plants, after 100,000, the machine started to wear down. So that's an A2. So what I'm going to go to my screen, back this off, and I'm going to type in an A2 on top of all that information. So I've got it narrowed down to about 5. There we go. So let's type in A2. Aha. That narrows it down to 2 choices. And let's see if one of them matches mine. And so it's either that one or that one, according to the computer. And now I just have to look at the font and the label itself. Indianapolis Pressing. There you go. Just like I told you. And sure enough, it matches. That's my record right there. So that little A2 was telling me where the record was pressed. And I have one of these. You can see that I added it 3 years ago. Right here. But I'm going to add this one again. Before I cleaned this, I was ready to give it like a good plus. It's almost a very good now. So cleaning can boost your condition 1. I'm still going to give it a good plus, which is better than the good that I have. So I'll add this to the collection. This is all computer screen stuff from this point forward. Let's get rid of this harness. Okay, so let's review what I just did. We found the record and we entered it. And I already had 1 copy. So actually I entered it twice by mistake while I was off camera. So let's get rid of this one. Here it is right here. My copy is a good plus. I also have a good. And we did pretty good. Here's all that information. Here's that A2 that we found in the dead wax. And, you know, you say, well, what difference does it make? Well, that's what identified it as an Indianapolis pressing. There's also an I in there somewhere. That's the Indianapolis sure giveaway. And there's a lot of variants, too. So this barcodes and identifier is huge. So another U.S. variant pressed at RCA's Indianapolis plant as stamped by I in the runouts. Well, sometimes they do A or A2 in the runouts. So that's our copy, and it's listed right here as a variant. So I've got 2 of them. I went ahead and listed it for sale. See this little blue dot right here? The median value is $385. The high value is $1076. That would be for like a mint copy. So I listed it for sale, and you can see there's RockMine, there's Detroit Bob, and you can see this record's for sale for $2. And then, but you got to pay $4.99 shipping. That's just the price of doing business. But I allow people to buy up to 4 records and combine, ship, and save on that shipping, and I keep it at $4.99. That's a huge little shipping trick. If you give your buyer extra value by bundling, yeah, you end up selling more, and you just dump them into the same box. So that's that. It's for sale. And I added another record to the collection. So that's how that part works. The dead wax is that little band, and you got to get into that dead wax because that's how we found out that it was an Indianapolis pressing. Otherwise, we had like 19 different versions we had to pick up from. It's a great record. I mean, this cleaned up nice, and this would play in a jukebox or on a turntable and sound absolutely fantastic. And I had this on a CKLW. I think I showed you guys the other day. I was playing that CKLW greatest hits, and this song was on it. So I'm very familiar with this song since I was about 5. It's a little bit bubblegum, but God love bubblegum. All right, here it is. In the raw, the gem of the week, Rockin' Robin by Michael Jackson. And I haven't even entered this into the computer yet, but I'm picking it off of raw emotion. And because I have a connection, I remember hearing this song when I was a kid. You can see it came out. And this is the great thing about these labels. In 1972, you see the Motown always puts the date on their label. And I'm down here in the furnace room in the RockMine laboratory. A lot of people didn't realize, but this is an actual map of Detroit. So we talked about the Lake Belt region. Unfortunately, they called it the Rust Belt for many years, but it's coming back. We were just in Detroit a couple months ago when I did an episode there. We visited Motown, but boy, I'll tell you what, it is really, really doing good. This is Canada right across from Detroit, and that's where my wife's from. But it gives you a lot of great information on this label. You can see the numbering system that they used, the ASCAP, which is the legal protection for the writers and the royalties and the rights, the number there. You can see what album it came off of, which is the Got to Be There, which also has its own lettering and numbering system. Executive producer BG. I wonder who that was. Probably Berry Gordy. Okay. So the time was 2 minutes and 39 seconds. Just tons of information just on the label. And we haven't even gone over to this other side. Produced by Mel Larson and Jerry Marcelino. Arranged by James Carmichael. And by this time, I would imagine most of this was being done out in LA. And I think 72 was the date that they moved. But now what you're seeing is a lot of dust. I'm going to do a live cleaning on this and see what it looks like. Let's look at the B side. Love is here and now you're gone. Now that's Howland, Dozier Howland. The two brothers, and Dozier was, I think, even maybe a cousin, but I'm not sure. But they were the famous songwriting team. And every 45 has a B-side. A lot of young people don't realize that. But the B-sides, sometimes it's a lesser-known hit. Sometimes it's a great hit. I don't know this song, but I'll certainly give it a listen. And once again, this song has different dates. It could have been done several different times. This is off of the album Got to Be There also. So a lesser known hit, but Got to Be There was a big hit. Definitely a great song by featuring Michael on lead vocals and lead on the whole thing. This isn't the Jackson 5 anymore. So let's clean it up and see what it looks like. Once again, Michael Jackson of the Jackson family. Gary, Indiana, the father, Joe, worked for one of the steel companies. I believe it was U.S. Steel. I'm going to do a good dry cleaning here. And once again, like I showed this morning, I'm just going to do some circular patterns with my record cleaning cloth. It's a microfiber cloth. But just look at with one pass, about 6 rotations. Now, I always change position when I do another swipe. And this is just what I call a dry cleaning, so no liquid at all. So, okay, let's do it in reverse. So we'll do that. About 6, sometimes 10. And just with a dry cleaning, this is in great shape. Let's flip it. Once again, a dry cleaning. And just with the dry cleaning, it's getting pretty close to very good plus category. It's not near mint, and why do I say that? You can see some scratches and some sort of grime sort of embedded. But it may clean up real good if a wet cleaning. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm just going to hit it with this laser media, the old VNC 8XL, Professional Vinyl Recording Cleaning Fluid Extra Strength. Okay, I've been using this stuff and I like it. I like the way the bottle sprays. I'm always getting like a nice fine mist. And when I spray it, I do like 3, almost like a triangle. So I try to get some, and I don't worry too much about the label getting wet. You know, some people get real sort of anal about that. I don't. I'm going to do the broadside first. Let's see how good we can get this thing looking. I'm going to do 10 that way. Reposition my bottom 4 fingers, which are like blades, almost like wiper blades. So really, it's the bottom that I'm cleaning. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Get all the way around. Reposition. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now I'm going to go to the dry side, which is the smaller little nub on the microfiber cloth. and that's really a drying. 3, 4, 5, 6. Reverse, reposition. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Flip. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you can feel the label where it begins, so you sort of back off on the pressure there. And look at that, man. I mean, that's pretty damn clean. It's definitely a very good plus. And this came out of the Ypsilanti lot. So you don't think that Motown had penetration into the wide market. There's a nice scuff. I'm not even going to call that a scratch, but I would call it a scuff in there. I don't know if you can see that. But I'm liking what I'm seeing, and certainly this is our gem of the week. Now, I'm going to enter it into the computer and see if, I have a feeling it's going to be somewhat of a common, but I don't know if I have one in this good a condition. So, conditions everything. I'm going to see how much it's worth, and I'm going to see what exact pressing this is, because in this dead wax we talked about earlier, there's a lot of information in there that really tells you everything you need to know in terms of where the record was actually made. So sometimes that's crucial. Let's find out. Okay, I just typed in M1197F, Michael Jackson, Rockin' Robin, and I get all of this. So it could be any of those. You can see here that I've got some copies. I've even got a couple for sale. But we know this is a US copy. So I'm going to hit that. And does that narrow it down? Not as much as I would like. So we're going to have to get in here and enter some of that dead wax info to really figure out what copy this is. Now, I don't know if you can see that or not, but that looks to me, it's sort of a cursive ARP stamp. And that's American Record Producers. I think that is where it was pressed. And is that Oswego, Michigan? Somewhere. I've heard Smokey Robinson talk about it, but that's where Motown had a lot of their stuff pressed. ARP. You could see it a little bit more clearly there. That could be the key. Let's enter it. All right, so if I enter ARP, boy, we get down to 2 now. So I'm going to hit a search on that. Chances are it's one of these 2. I can float over that, or I can float over that. Now it's just a matter of hitting both of these and then matching the font almost. So let's take a look at this. There's Rockin' Robin. Boy, that looks pretty close. And that's got to be it. Everything looks good on the original. Even how this little, right there, you can see that. I don't know if you can see that right there. See that little copyright in there, right there? And then look at the computer screen, how it almost touches the M. And everything else looks good. Hang on. I take that back. This paragraph, the font and the placing is different than on the record. So right there, I got a different copy. So let's find the right one. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines of font. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's not the same record. All right, I'm going to have to open it up and find it. And this is how tedious this can get. See all versions. I'm going to have to open up the search and expand the search, even though I was quite sure. But I'm going to go format. Right here, I'm going to pick 45. I'm going to go label. I'm going to go Motown. I'm going to go country. I'm going to go US. And I'm going to go 1972. So there's 2 others here that it could be. And it might be just this top one right here. But it says superior pressing. So I'm really sort of stumped on this one. because that's a definite different arrangement of that sidebar. Boy, I'm gonna have to put my camera down and dig in it. I'll find it though. All right, I think I found it, because here it is. The ARP, if you see right there on the right, and it says something down here that's interesting. A thicker, like title artist print variant. ARP stamped in the runout. So we definitely saw that. And there's some other identifiers. But the key for me is looking at the label itself. Let's blow that baby up. Look at that font right there on the right. That seems to be different on almost every one. And then look at the record itself. There it is. That's a match. And we showed you that ARP. It's pretty intense over here somewhere in this dead wax. So we're good there. Yeah, I got a match. Let's see how much it's worth. All right, let's give it a play. You might call this bubblegum. I just call it great American music. So let's plop it on the turntable. And we're going to zoom in a little bit here. Got to change our speed over to 45 because I had an LP on here. For all you little leaguers out there, make sure you do that. Got some decent lighting going here. Let's bring this down and let's give this baby a spin. Rockin' Robin by Michael Jackson, and let's let her rip. From the top. How cool is that? Look at that label spinning. I was 9 years old when this came out. Little key change there. Kick up the energy. Seems like even the speed's going up. Rockin' Robin. Hey, 9 years old, you call it bubblegum. The Jacksons had a television show, a cartoon. Of course, the Osmonds were competing, but the Jacksons were just cooler, man. They had the style, they had the floppy hats. And when you're watching the cartoons, next thing you know, you're out buying a 45. And most kids our age, we could afford 45s. They were like 99 cents, sometimes even 75 cents. Who could afford an album? Those were $4 or $5. But you could always scrounge up a buck and find a 45, like Rockin' Robin on Motown Records by Michael Jackson. And the Jackson 5, we're almost in the rearview mirror now, because you know Michael's career took off. From this point on, everybody knew who Michael Jackson was. He was a household name. Most of these songs are only 2 minutes long. That's the beauty of it. Actually, it's a remake. I think someone did it back in the 50s. I can't remember. The little help in the comments would help with that. But what a great breakout song for Michael. Snappy little pop hit. What a great sound. A piece of Americana from the fabric of music that wove together the Lake Belt, the Rust Belt, the factories in Gary, Detroit, Chicago, Cleveland, all the way up and down the Great Lakes. We're rocking to Rockin' Robin.